you could feel at Anfield yesterday a sense of, we don't know when this might happen again, so we're going to make the most of it. And what I will remember are the moments. Harvey Elliott in Richarlison, which was very funny. The moment of Salah taking that selfie. The moment when Arne Slot approached the Kop and they cut the music and he did Klopp's fist pumps. The moment when he sang a song for Jurgen Klopp in the same way as Klopp had done for Slot a year ago. On a personal level that I remember, my son reaching over and giving me a hug in the moment when the final whistle went. The families, the friends who are together, the mates that you only have at the match, the people who you sit next to by accident of fate and ticketing systems. All of that shared moment of joy. People wanted to live in that. They wanted to inhabit that for as long as they could, and that's what you felt. That's what that noise was.
Way back, like Shador Sanders, after a week of enormous footballing moments, Liverpool slaughtering Spurs, romping to the title, one with no asterisk, I don't know, but Arne Slot probably thinking about that decision in life to turn down the chance to be Tottenham's manager last year and thinking, maybe I did dodge a bullet. We'll break down all the emotions of Liverpool's 20th title win, Wrexham's ongoing hero's journey, Crystal Palace making an FA Cup final again at Wembley as the greatest neutral favourite since probably Kendrick Lamar, and Manchester United won a big boy point. And I'm not here alone, because to break it all down, we got my friend who was at Wembley this weekend and then at Anfield, and who was a massive red, is currently happier than Peppa Pig's dad when he found out the new baby's going to be a girl. It's a joy to welcome back, now of The Observer, the Crown Prince of Harrogate, Terry's chocolate orange connoisseur, it's Mr. Rory Smith.
Hi, Rog.
You try not to gloat, because I want to try and be the bigger man and follow the moral example walked by Pep Guardiola when he pretended to congratulate Liverpool, even as he was planning their demise, Raw. But congratulations.
Pep Guardiola congratulating Liverpool and pointing out that his team have won the real honour, which is 7 consecutive FA Cup semi-finals. Living the dream.
Just take the congratulations already, man.
People keep... You're not the first person to congratulate me, Rog. And I would say it's quite nice, because I feel as though my role in Liverpool's title charge has been underestimated, to be honest. I feel like I've contributed as much as Federico Chiesa.
Yeah, you've done more than... No, don't sell yourself short. You've done more than those 4 substitution appearances. But you did say to me before we got on, people keep congratulating me, and all it does is remind me I've done nothing.
It does. It makes me feel worse, if anything. Like, what have you done to contribute to this triumph that you're kind of reflecting in the glory of? And it's quite chilling and troubling, really. But I will say this, and I don't want to gloat. You can tell my voice is a little bit hoarse because I've spent most of yesterday singing quite loudly, and then shouting in a way that disgraced myself in front of my son at Richarlison.
That was amazing, and we are going to get to that. Like, genuinely, you're on the cusp of something truly beautiful that you've dreamt of for decades, and you all couldn't help yourselves. In that second of glory, Harvey Elliott had to chance to house Richarlison. Yes, please.
I think I didn't see. I wasn't really paying attention. I think Richarlison started it, but there's something about Richarlison that really gets under Anfield's skin. I think that's fair to say. But it was a truly wonderful experience. Not just for me, it would have been enough for me on my own, but my little boy was with me, and to see his face, that's the thing that I will remember the most. From Sunday, April the 27th, 2025. I
mean, that is beautiful. We will break the actual game down as whatever quasi-football game it actually was in just one moment. But I was going to ask you, how you experience football. We watch so much professionally, and I do wonder, does it make you jaded? Or are you able to tap into the little fan inside of your Rory? Like, do you still feel the game's magic? You've kind of answered that. You do, using your son as a prop.
Yeah, that's how I see my children, as props for my life. It was interesting. It's the first time I've been at something like that without working. So I obviously saw Liverpool win the Champions League in 2019 in Madrid. And when Divock Origi scored in the 84th minute, whatever it was, the second goal, my first thought wasn't Liverpool are going to win the Champions League. It was, I can start writing. I can start kind of writing the thing I'm meant to be writing. I know which way this game is going now. Or at least I can take a reasonable guess. Yesterday, I wasn't working. I was there just with my son. I could concentrate on him, on the experience, on kind of living in that emotional moment. And it was really powerful. There's no kind of jadedness whatsoever. I would say the happiness that I felt in the 10 minutes after the final whistle, when they played Dua Lipa and then they played Freed from Desire, and the whole ground was dancing and bouncing and singing with the players. There was a purity to that happiness that, to be honest, took me by surprise a little bit. I was surprised by how joyful it was.
I've got two things to say to that, because it really is beautiful, because you're not an overtly emotional man. So what you've just admitted is genuinely like gushing. It's your equivalent of sobbing on television. But your son, you showed me photos of this yesterday. Your son is what? He's like 7, right?
7, yeah.
That kid has no idea how lucky he is to time the formative years of his life with all this Liverpool winning, and not, like you, 30 years of wilderness.
Well, you say that, Rog, but I remember just about them winning the lead in 1990, and it took a while for another one to come along, so I'm a bit worried that Ed doesn't quite appreciate that what he's just seen. He might have to wait 3 decades to experience it again.
It's just like, yeah, all this winning. But anyway, when you said you were surprised how emotional you were, I've got to be really honest with you in this moment. I was surprised how emotional I felt watching. I mean, partially because my brother Nige, the Red, was there. He got there, like so many Liverpool supporters, like 5-6 hours before kickoff to really drink it in, to make the memories consciously, to let the history and the occasion kind of seep in. We had an emotional genius, the writer Brené Brown. I think this is why I was quite moved. She came on our show last week. She's a massive Red. And she talks about this concept, a sociological concept of collective effervescence. Those are the words we talked about. She defined it as strangers coming together to sharing deep, meaningful connections that are bigger than us and mean more as individuals. A phrase that she used was something like, and in her Texas accent it sounded better. She said that there's just a bubbly kind of holiness. Something really sacred was her phrase. And I think that stayed with me, because I was surprised, as a horrible person who considers themselves to be dead inside, watching it at home from thousands of miles away. I'll be honest, I also do a balancing act, Raw. You do the professional and the fan. I have an inherent hatred of Liverpool from my childhood. But the older I get, and I've talked about this a lot, the more I realise life's too short, the world's too effed. I found it very moving. I found it unbelievably moving, if I'm being honest, watching the human emotions lived out. And 98% of me is an Evertonian, but the 2% that is human was deeply moved watching the sun, the full Anfield. I think also as a child of the city, my own brother there, knowing how effed the city was in the 80s when I grew up. City which is now so beautiful again. But the city burnt itself down when I was a kid. It was really left to rot. It's been rebuilt with huge investment. It's an incredible city to visit, but life's still bloody tough there to live there. It's a hard place. Post-industrial. Football, music, still the things with which, the twin joys with which we announce ourselves to the world. So I do, even in my Everton dominant life, I watched and felt a happiness for the people I love watching that thing. It's like seeing someone who's a different religion to you feel a sense of spiritual elevation. At a time we all really need it. Yeah,
it was hard. It's hard not to be uplifted in those moments. I remember sitting in the Etihad in 2022 when Liverpool were beaten to the title by Manchester City by a point on the last day of the season. The City were losing 2-0 to Villa, scored 3 goals in 8 minutes or something to come back, and it was kind of snatched from Liverpool's grasp. And I felt nauseous, I was deeply hurt. But at the same time, as the fans poured onto the pitch, as İlkay Gündoğan celebrated, as City lifted the trophy, it's really hard not to enjoy their joy. And I maybe would struggle a bit more if it was Manchester United. I don't know. It's thankfully quite a long way away. But there is an ability to share the joy of other fans vicariously. And the best example of that, and it was something I actually found surprisingly moving yesterday, after the final whistle, Liverpool had 10 minutes, as I say, of One Kiss by Dua Lipa, which has become a kind of unofficial club anthem. Not quite sure what Bill Shankly would make of One Kiss by Dua Lipa being sung by the Kop. And then they had Freed from Desire, the European anthem of success. And then the players kind of did a very, very slow lap of honour. And as they reached the Anfield Road end, the opposite end to the Kop, the Tottenham fans, who you would expect in that situation to have cleared out, their team had been beaten heavily. They're 16th in the Premier League table. They've got much bigger, more important things to come up this week in the Europa League semi-final. That section of the ground was 2/3 full. 3,000 or 4,000 Spurs fans had stayed behind to watch the celebrations, to watch Liverpool revel in its moment. And I'm biased, obviously, I'll admit to that. The show would have been spectacular. To watch 56, 57,000 people singing in unison, to watch that joy, to watch that euphoria, would have been, I think, mind-blowing, regardless of affiliation. But it spoke volumes to me of the nobility and the classiness of those Spurs fans, to think we could just scarper. I mean, maybe they were thinking there's 100,000 people outside Anfield, let's just stay here. But they could have thought, let's just go. This has been a miserable afternoon. We don't want to watch somebody else's party. But they stayed, and as the Liverpool players reached them, they applauded. And that is what football should be like.
I've got two reactions to that, Ro. The first is Bill Shankly, I'm pretty sure, is more of a Charlie XCX kind of guy.
Oh, he's full on Brat Summer.
I also want to be honest, as I hit your Tottenham story, I did also watch, and part of me prayed that I can feel the kind of happiness through football that Liverpool fans did yesterday, at least once again in my lifetime.
Well, maybe it's that. Maybe there is a part of you trying to want to watch it to see what it feels like, even if it's at one remove, because yeah, the experience of watching Liverpool win a lead in a full stadium with the fans there was more powerful than I was expecting. I've watched a lot of football matches. I'm really lucky, Rog. I've been to hundreds of football matches, hundreds of stadiums. I've seen World Cup finals and Champions League finals in the flesh. I thought I wasn't dead inside, but I thought my sort of resistance was higher, but it wasn't. And there was a point in that in those 10 minutes after the final whistle where I thought I cannot believe I am this happy.
Was there a tear?
Oh, no, come on, I'm from Yorkshire. No, obviously not. I wouldn't cry, not in public. There was looking at my son.
Was there a dance move?
Oh, there was a dance. There was a point where
a dance move is essentially in Yorkshire. That's the equivalent in the rest of the world as a tear. Lots of football to get to. Arsenal fans will break down your clash of clashes with PSG in the Champions League in full in tomorrow's European Night Show. We'll touch upon Spurs' epic Arctic Rumble with Bodo Glimt too. Also, Mikel Arteta making the terrible mistake of returning to be with us on this show later this week. So let's dive in. Start with the toast. I want to raise my third first Michelob Ultra of the day to truly mighty Wrexham, who gained promotion for an unprecedented third straight year. That tiny macro power from North Wales, the one that the world first fell in love with when they were in the National League, the fifth tier, and now in the Championship, just one step from the Premier League big time, the promised land. They rolled over Charlton 3-0 in probably the most complete performance of the season amidst delirious scenes on Saturday at the Stoke Kairas, clinching back-to-back promotion at record-breaking pace. The town were last at this level in 1982, which means that two generations of Wrexham fans have never seen the club soar to these heights. It's incredible to watch, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, who I've admired how they've led so much in an era in which so many North American owners just kind of swagger in with bluster and misstep after misstep. They've led with a real humility. They've listened, they've learned, listened to the club, to the town, to the fans. I joke that watching this story is a little bit like watching Cool Runnings, in which the Jamaicans end up winning gold in a bobsled, sponsored by Rob and Ryan. But it has been an honour to cover it all personally, so bloody close, over the last couple of seasons with our Stoke Cold Brew series this week in Wrexham. Started the campaign in Vancouver, live on stage with the team, with the great manager Phil Parkinson, and then to be at the first game of the season in person to watch the Wickham beaten in the sunshine. All the talk that day before the game was about a season of consolidation, just mid-table adjustment to the new level so the club didn't kind of get the bends like a diver coming to the surface too quickly. We had no idea what would come to pass. Really a hero's journey. Collective glory. It didn't stop. Everything feels possible. But what continues to stand out, honestly, is the memories being made by those fans who, in a large way, judging by the emails we've had over the past weekend, they still can't believe what they're seeing, even as they're making memories that will be retold for generation. But Raw, let me ask you this. The Championship, it's a hard place. It's not cuddly. It's like a prison yard with homemade shivs. It's not for dreamers. This club is inextricably going to change. We just had Humphrey Carr on, the legendary club director, who just said for the first time he parked his vehicle and had someone who works for the club say, "Hey, who are you?" Like, the club is now so big, not everybody knows each other anymore. There's going to be new players. There are new players. New kings have delivered this title. Ollie Rathbone, Max Cleworth, Arthur Okonkwo, and the old Premier League warriors, Stephen Fletcher, James McLean. The Championship, it is going to be super tough. The club are already linked to Jamie Vardy, De Bruyne, via Paper Talk. We're about to see like a young, cute baby kind of morph irrevocably into a moody adolescent, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Championship is the most cutthroat, most brutal league in soccer, to be honest. It's a horrible place. As someone who lives in and near Leeds and has a lot of friends who support Leeds, I can testify to that. Maybe second hand is probably the best way of putting it. It's not fun in a lot of ways, the Championship, and the club will have to grow in scale. The money that will come in will be different. The expectation level will have to shift a little bit. The standard goes up. I think League 2 and League 1 are... The top of League 1 is better than the bottom of League 2, but the difference isn't huge, whereas once you get into the Championship, you are dealing with kind of a Premier League 2, to be honest. There's players of international quality. You know, in the Championship pauses for international breaks. That kind of tells you all you need to know about the Championship. That's where the Championship is now. The one thing that's really interesting, I suppose, narratively, is that this makes Wrexham underdogs again. For the first time since the National League, Wrexham are probably that first series in the National League. Wrexham are the underdogs because in the National League, once the Reynolds and McLenny money had kicked in, they had a far bigger budget than everybody else. In League 2 and League 1, the same, apart from Birmingham City, of course, and Tom Brady. Wrexham were superpowers in those leagues. In the Championship, they won't be. They'll be dealing with, Leicester will have earned £100 million, $120 million for being terrible in the Premier League this season. They have owners who have unimaginable wealth, even by Reynolds standards. I mean, I don't know if you can buy the gin that Ryan Reynolds backs in King Power's duty-free stores in Thailand. But maybe there's some synergy there, Ryan. That's all I'm saying. Maybe that's a suggestion. But, they are dealing with a different class of opponent now. It will be tough. They will, for the first time in 3 or 4 years, be kind of underdogs in that sense that they were at the start.
By the way, we've had so many beautiful letters over the weekend. We made so many deep friendships from our coverage of Wrexham. One of the gents, the characters that appear so much with Tommy Cheese in This Week in Wrexham, Bournemouth Rich, wrote us a beautiful email in which he said, "We went from a deflated balloon left over from the Christmas party after Wigan and Bristol Rovers to a balloon filled with too much helium floating in the air." That's what it feels like for the Wrexham fans. I'm so bloody happy for them. I grew up, Wrexham's just across the border from Liverpool in Wales. Same kind of economic, post-industrial turmoil. And I watch with wonder just at the depths of this achievement and see what Ryan and Rob have done to transform a region, not just a football club, but a region that was utterly left for dead. I mean, North Wales is bogged down in economic decline. It was destined for irrelevance, for doom. And what this team have done is put Wrexham on the map in the world. Wrexham is now known, and they've transformed in doing so the entire region, created almost a green shoot sense of possibility and hope. And that's the power of this moment. I want to underline it all. Football is at its best when it transcends football. Wrexham transcends football. Here's the big question, though, for you, Rory. Where are Real Madrid going to park the team coach at the Stoke Kairas for that first Champions League night? Well,
that's the natural kind of conclusion, isn't it? And the thing is, you wouldn't necessarily be staggered to see Wrexham make it into the make it through the Championship, certainly through the playoffs. Obviously, the three that come down, Ipswich, Southampton and Leicester, have a massive advantage. Then you have the huge morass in the middle, who are basically all as good as each other, and then there tend to be 2 or 3 a little bit weaker at the bottom. But Southampton haven't been very good. They'll be quite demoralised. Leicester have been awful. Ipswich will lose their best player, with all apologies to J-Dubs, our producer. It's not impossible, is it? It's not impossible that with all that momentum, that Wrexham kind of make that final step. That would be astonishing.
Jamie Vardy, wearing the red of Wrexham, delivering the goals against Leicester City that get Wrexham promoted. We can but dream. And talking about dreams, your dreams, my nightmares, let's get to it, Raw. Liverpool 5, Tottenham Hotspur 1. Really less a football game, more a coronation or a communion. Spurs were there. So it was also a little bit of a circus. Arne Slot had taught beautifully going into this one, I thought, about he used the word responsibility to win the title at Anfield in front of those fans. The 19th title had been won, of course, fanless during the pandemic. In came Dr. Tottenham, bee-stung Tottenham, mortally wounded Big Ange, honestly, made 8 changes, which has been forgotten in this game. When you make 8 changes, it's kind of it is the most ever between 2 Premier League games. Obviously, he's got his eyes on both Bodo and Glimt, but you kind of make 8 changes when you don't care at all and just want that trophy. Not to save your job, but to give you the leverage to give the world the finger as it destroys you. But at kickoff, there was a tiny bit of me, Raw. I've got to be candid, just a tiny little crevice that wanted Spurs to win and spark Arsenal's most remontada-y of remontadas of all time. I think it was the 10,000 blue flares that one glorious Everton fan had spent apparently 4 months repackaging the outer label, replacing blue flares with red flare stickers, then selling them back onto the market. So that amidst the red smoke roar across Anfield, there were lots of blue. Is that not the most petty, quite wonderfully almost CIA ops from the 1960s level football fan thinking you've ever seen?
There's a certain level of depth of pettiness that I think you have to stand back and admire, to be honest. You are so kind of inspired by ruining this inevitable celebration that you're prepared to go to the not even the financial effort, just the physical effort of the labelling.
Yes,
that is extraordinary.
Months. It's incredible. Honestly, it's the equivalent of John Green, who signs, I think, 500,000 books before they go out onto the market. I'm like, that is next level dedication. That is the John Green of petty fan spite. And it's if we harness that creativity, that commitment, I do think Everton can get into Europe next season. But that was where I was, a little schadenfreudy going in. I was thinking, an ember of possibility. And then on 12 minutes, out of nowhere, Tottenham took the lead off a corner. Dom Solanke scoring against his own team, celebrating as he should do. It was a great header. I was like, would it be the most Spursy thing of all time to start a comeback that leads to Arsenal snatching the title, Raw?
It's not even that. This sounds like hindsight now, Rog. I have never been more certain of anything going into a football match than that Spurs would score first at Anfield. Never been more certain of anything.
Why?
Just that is the way. It's the way football works. It's
so when it happened, you're like, "Yep."
Yeah. No, I did. I turned to my mate who I sat next to, or who's the other side of Ed, and said, "Told you," because that's obvious. It was obvious Spurs were going to score first. Liverpool should really have given them the ball in the first minute and just parted ways.
So never any fear. Never any fear. You were just like, you turned around to Ed and just said to your son, your 7-year-old, and said, "Don't worry, son, let me introduce you to the literary construct of misdirection."
Maybe. There was fear. I was terrified. But what really stood out, even amid that fear, was the fact that the noise you heard after Solanke's goal was almost 60,000 people saying, "Oh, for crying out loud." That was that noise. If ever you need that, if you're making a film and you need the sound of sort of mass frustration, it's the noise that occurred at Anfield in the immediate second after Dominic Solanke's goal. It was just everyone going, "Oh," like that.
60,000 voices, people's Scousers just explained to their son or daughter, "It's misdirection. It's a literary construct. Yeah, don't worry."
I'm slightly surprised that on the TV.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not allowed to say the really bad curse words, Rog.
Yeah, misdirection.
But I'm a little bit surprised you couldn't hear everyone just going, "Foot." Just that "th" sound. That's all you heard. That's all you heard, and then a few Spurs fans celebrating.
When you said "for crying out loud," I was about to say, Rob, I've never heard a single Scouser ever utter that phrase. But
it wasn't. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. Yeah. The F word obviously being Federico Chiesa.
Yeah.
But it took Liverpool about 12 minutes of cursing to turn it around. The most unsurprising foraging that occurred against a Spurs high line, which is, I'd just say, matching that Spurs high line up against the Liverpool, when it's 4 when they're in attack, is the opposite of a rock and a hard place. Really a motif of Liverpool season had been conceding first, so this was almost a hat tip to their greatest hits. Liverpool started the speed in behind. Salah fed Szoboszlai, was ruled offside as he reached the byline, pull back for Diaz to slide in. I do not know what happened to semi-automatic offside calls in this game. Szoboszlai was honestly miles on. Goal given belatedly. cue Anfield eruptions audible from outer space, and then Spurs just buried themselves trying to play the ball out the back with the confidence of a newborn giraffe trying to take its faltering first steps. I think it was Udogie who was hemmed in. Could have punted it down the field. Why would he? When he could just panic and prop it right back into his own box. Alexis McAllister ultimately took possession on the edge of the area. Rory, what was it like for you when that Argentinian World Cup winner, wearing red now, just left-footed and all, with an anger and a clinicality, smacked that ball, still rising as it smashed into the top of the net with a sound that was like champagne corks popping all across Merseyside?
Well, you have to bear in mind, so we walked up to Anfield and you could barely see it because of the pyro smoke. It was sort of cast in this haze of pink.
All that blue.
And all that blue, all that purple. Surprisingly purple Anfield. The noise in the hour before kickoff got steadily and steadily louder. My ears were ringing within 5 minutes of kickoff because of the "Now You're Gonna Believe Us" chant. Obviously a bit of a dip after Solanke scored. The reaction to the Diaz goal going in, then the Diaz goal being given, was another level still. I haven't heard Anfield as loud as it was after the McAllister goal since Gini Wijnaldum's second against Barcelona in 2019. It was louder than the Origi goal that won that game because there was confusion about whether that would be allowed to stand. The noise that came out of Anfield for the McAllister goal was genuinely ear-splitting.
It was lovely to watch Slot in that moment celebrate, really let loose for a second on the sideline. I look at him, I'm like, dude looks like my stunt double. We'll talk more about him in one moment. But as Liverpool had scored 6 early in the season against Spurs and then 4 in the League Cup. So in that moment, it just felt not a matter of how this game would end up, just how many goals would be scored. And it was Tottenham just serving up the delicious assist with their defensive appetite for self-destruction. Cody Gakpo got a third, slapping home off a corner. I think it was Bergvall who failed to clear. He unveiled his "I Belong to Jesus" t-shirt, really a hat tip to Kaká's iconic undershirt from the 2007 Champions League final. I think he'd scored against Liverpool in that one. That is, by the way, that is football ball knowledge. Jesus saves, but he can't prevent you from getting a yellow card. Rory, do you think Darwin Núñez had a "Why Always Me" on under his shirt just in case on the bench?
When Darwin did eventually come on, my son turned to me and said, it's nice they've let Darwin on. He likes to have a run around. And it made him sound like a dog. And it was the most... Even as I couldn't really hear anything and I was singing, I thought it genuinely made me laugh. My son does talk about Darwin Núñez like he talks about our pet.
Oh, it's nice they've let him out of the house.
He needs time off the lead, Rog.
Yeah, I know, we all do emotionally. But I think history will never know. And I would love to have Darwin Núñez. I bet you, like, a lot of those guys had shirts on under the shirt just to unleash. I'd like to think they were all football heritage ones. And I do want to know what Darwin Núñez has said.
But you are absolutely right, though. Just Gakpo got the font right.
Yes.
That's the Kaká font. That didn't occur to me at the time, but that is the Kaká font. That is incredibly deep-cut knowledge.
It is. It's like Timothy Chalamet level of ball knowledge. He's a ball knower at Chalamet levels. Second half felt like it wasn't really a competitive Premier League game. It was like going to a Broadway play where they do a particularly long curtain call with each actor taking like a profound moment to do a deep bow, both in the persona of their character and then they drop the character and just say, "No, it was me all the time." And so it seemed, 63rd minute, Szoboszlai scampered upfield, fed Mo Salah. Mo was never going to pass this ball, ever. Cut inside, that was all he was ever going to do. Lashed home, 28th of the season in the league. Has now scored more goals than any other overseas player in Premier League history. Every bloody goal he scores is a record. Top Sergio Aguero with 185. And we've talked before a little bit, in these big moments, more than any other football player I've ever seen, Mo always seems to be very, very conscious of his connection. A lot of players like Erling Haaland do remarkable celebrations. Mo understands his connection, his communion to the fans. He's actually used it quite deftly throughout the contract negotiation, but he seems to have a true empathy with the Scouse faithful. Never more than here. Grabbed the phone from what turns out, I think, to be a Liverpool photographer behind the goal, took the photo. I watched it, I was like, oh my God, 10 million likes instantly. Well, what a move. A little bit like Ellen's Oscar selfie, but somehow bigger because it crowned a moment in which so many season storylines just came together.
Also, it's less likely to prove problematic in years to come. It was. I think you're right. I think Salah has always had a slightly unusual trait of of making the celebrations themselves his celebration. It's like a meta celebration. And I saw my friend Neil Atkinson from the Anfield Rap quoted in The Guardian, I think, before the game, that he's always been fascinated by Salah's celebration against Manchester City in the Champions League. The first time that Salah scored a kind of iconic Champions League goal, and the Etihad that night, the away end at the Etihad it sort of melted into total chaos, like absolute unfettered bedlam. And Salah just went and stood in front of it and looked at it. And Neil's point is he's done that deliberately. When he sees that happen, what is he seeing? What is he thinking? And we'll never know.
What's he feeling?
Well, Salah's he's a very reserved, quite quiet character in terms of his public persona.
And he doesn't strike me as being like, I'm extremely online, like I'm no. Like genuinely extreme. He's not that guy, so it's so natural.
And it was the same on Sunday, that it sort of said two things. One was, it was very much kind of, we are all part of this together. This is a kind of a unified, united, bad word to use, event that we are all experiencing at the same time, just from different vantage points. But the other thing that it said, when he went back for the phone to take the selfie, it marked the game's transition from theoretically competitive sporting event to party. At that point, it was over. If your players are stopping during the game to do double celebrations to create content, then it is no longer competitive sport. And a few minutes later, that was confirmed, because the ball came to Virgil van Dijk about 40 yards out from goal. And Virgil, in a normal situation, would do the sensible thing, the kind of 33-year-old central defender who knows exactly what he's doing. He'd set, and he'd build the play again. But because I think Mo had taken the selfie, Virgil van Dijk had decided, this isn't a serious event anymore. We know what's going to happen. We should be enjoying this. And Virgil had a shot. And when it went wide, Virgil laughed. Extremely, you could tell that he was laughing genuinely, deeply, sincerely. And I think Salah's celebration had changed the mood among the players as well. It had said, okay, I now give you permission almost.
God,
let's start
funny.
taking the piss.
Yeah, and also third, Google Pixel, official sponsor of Liverpool Football Club. I mean, it was so brilliant on so many bloody levels. By the way, the thing about laughing when you miss and you verge, when I spent some time with James Tarkowski after he scored that goal, the goal at Goodison Park, which was delirious at the time, but all it did was give Liverpool ultimately the chance to celebrate with their fans. If he hadn't scored, you would have won the league. When Arsenal faltered midweek, we can't have nice things, even when we have nice things. But I said to him, Tar, whenever you go up for a header from a corner, so often you miss by inches and run back laughing. And he said, yeah, I'm not laughing. I'm laughing to hide the pain. So I don't know about
I don't think Virgil was feeling any pain at that point.
God, don't take away my fact that Virgil was in pain in that moment. That's all I'm clinging on to. But God bless Mo, the best player on the best team, so irresistible that at age 32, him re-signing was greeted like a Premier League title in itself. And that was how we had, as we've already discussed, Harvey Elliott giving Richarlison the fingers in the seconds before that long dreamed of moment of glory, which I do love. Like, even in the happiest of times for yourself, children, there's still take a pause, house. Why don't you just house Richarlison?
You should always house Richarlison at any given moment. But what I loved about that was, have you seen what Elliott was signifying?
Go on.
So it wasn't immediately apparent within the stadium. It was very quick. You could see he was saying something. He was indicating something with his fingers. And I've got to admit, I quibble with Harvey Elliott's technique. But he was showing 3 fingers on one hand and 0 on the other, which mark 30 years since an Everton trophy. And for Harvey Elliott to think of that in that moment, I genuinely and sincerely believe Rog should earn him a lifetime contract at Liverpool.
God bless. You know what? I wish Harvey Elliott a lifetime contract at Liverpool. That's all I am saying. And Richarlison, we knew your pain in that moment. We saw that. Come back to us. come back to us. We need each other. We've got Moisey back. We need you back. Let's get the band back together. But this is not about us. At the final whistle, Opta tweeted, Liverpool ranked first in the Premier League in goals, 80 shots, 591 shots on target, 216 expected goals, 75.5 big chances, 136, on and on and on. Just a point of saying anyone that says they did not deserve this, it's an inane debate. They've won the title at a canter, 15 points clear with 4 games still to go. And the scenes at the final whistle, Slot, as he, you know, in a very Slot way, hugging his assistants in that moment. Virgil first pointing at the sky and then carrying the ball around like it was his first newborn. Mo beaming, Alisson's tears, and then hugging Andy Robertson and Endo, which was beautiful in its own way. Just the bass players who've done so much of the hard work, the unrelenting work, being together. Trent hugging fellow Scouser Curtis Jones, the smoke, the flares, the singing. I mean, Rolf, for the fans, you were there. That sense of collective effervescence that I hinted at earlier. These fans who were denied the chance to watch the 2020 team lift their trophy because of the pandemic. I watched that and I did feel, you know, I'm a horrible person, but I was like, seizing the moment, be aware that you should never take it for granted, that no matter who we are, it felt like everyone in that moment knew that their chance to watch this kind of joy, all of our days are numbered.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's forgotten, brushed over a little bit, that the last time Liverpool won the league in front of fans in 1990, I'm not even sure Anfield was full. It was a very kind of stately, quite serene, quite placid sort of occasion. Alan Hansen, the captain, then kind of lifting the trophy in a very formal fashion in the middle of the pitch. Liverpool had won a lot. Liverpool were used to winning. It wasn't a spectacular victory, as you say. It was a time in the city's history when they were still coming to terms with all of the events of the 1980s, the political kind of destruction of the city that had been inflicted upon it, as well as the Hillsborough disaster the year before. And I think you could feel at Anfield yesterday a sense of, we don't know when this might happen again, so we're going to make the most of it. That there was nothing taken for granted about this being the start of a dynasty, or, you know, can we now go and win the Champions League, or whatever it was. It was very much, this is a moment we want to experience. And what I will remember are the moments. It's the moment of Harvey Elliott shithousing Richarlison, which was very funny. The moment of Salah taking that selfie, which was slightly deliberately and a little bit knowingly iconic. The moment when Arne Slot approached the Kop and they cut the music and he did Klopp's fist pumps, which was very much the kind of first time he's been willing to show that kind of emotion in front of the fans, because he's steered away from it. He doesn't want to look like a Jurgen Klopp tribute act. The moment when he said in his on-pitch interview, I have to thank one person, and sang a song for Jurgen Klopp in the same way as Klopp had done for Slot a year ago. You had this succession of moments. But the main thing on a personal level that I remember is my son reaching over and giving me a hug in the moment when the final whistle went. That is the thing that was most meaningful, and I think that would have been replayed 60,000 times across Anfield. That the people who are, the families, the friends who are together, the mates that you only have at the match, the people who you sit next to by accident of fate and ticketing systems, all of that shared moment of joy, people wanted to live in that. They wanted to inhabit that for as long as they could, and that's what you felt. That's what that noise was.
What, 60,000 people looking at their phones and seeing Ed hug Rory, and Rory not crying, but crying on the inside?
Crying on the inside. No, I think it was people kind of... My sense had always been with 2020 that it felt really special. And it, as much as it wasn't in front of anybody, as much as it was in an empty stadium in that curious kind of COVID world, it still felt special because it was the end of the wait. It was the end of the wait for 30 years to win a title. It was the first time I was really conscious of Liverpool winning the title. And I thought that was what winning the title felt like. And I think what a lot of people discovered at full time yesterday is that that's not what winning a title feels like. Winning a title feels like something completely different.
Can you put that into words?
This sounds really cheesy, and you're making a Northern English man very uncomfortable. But it was just a kind of a lightness. You felt light, as though all the stuff that you're dealing with in your normal life, and everyone faces huge amounts of stress and strain and issues and problems, particularly at this moment when we also have to kind of deal with much grander issues and much grander challenges than any of us are really qualified to face, you felt light. You felt as though the sun would always shine and the sun would never end. And it didn't last, obviously, just then after an hour or so, everyone kind of filters out the stadium and you go outside and you'll be like, how do I get to my car? But in that moment, it was as though it was like something warm just sort of trickling through you and sitting there somewhere deep in your soul. It was a genuinely beautiful feeling.
I do wonder, you've articulated it beautifully and I'm incredibly grateful. Watching the You'll Never Walk Alone, the players, the coaches communing with the fans in a moment of glory, that was a pure and adulterated Brene Brown collective effervescence. And by the way, it did go on raw. You may have got into your car, but the shots at like 10, 11 o'clock outside of Anfield where fans still, I can't believe they were still standing, never mind being there. But then, they'd even got into the Roberto Firmino chants. Like they were singing the greatest hits. This was James Taylor singing Fire and Rain and You've Got a Friend. They were just churning out the hits. By the way, GFOP at Mash James wrote to us asking, after he posted this right after the You'll Never Walk Alone, which was, even to my veiled distaste and hatred, etc., it was magnificent. GFOP at Mash James wrote, how can Trent leave after that?
But I suppose the flip side is, what better way to leave? That would maybe be the rationale he'd use. I agree, the same thought occurred to me, that when you looked at him, the slightly, I don't want to say strange look on his face, but you could tell there was a lot going on in Trent's head. You could see that even from a distance, and especially whenever he was on camera, you could see there was that is a guy working through some stuff. And I think football has to be ruthless, and it has to be brutal, and it has to be kind of cold-headed. And he's making, we think, a thoroughly sensible, entirely rational decision to expand his horizons, to change his career, to get the most out of his ability and his talent, to see a bit more of the world. And that's stuff that we should never begrudge anybody the chance to see. But at the same time, when he watches that, as a boyhood Liverpool fan, that's going to make that moment where he does have to say goodbye really difficult.
We've talked a lot about that. We'll talk about it again. I've got a feeling maybe he's just bored of the song at this point. Not Fire and Rain again. Oh my God, I've got to play Fire and Rain. Let me play some of my new album. Who wants to hear something off my new album?
The most awkward point of Sunday afternoon was towards the end of the on-pitch celebrations. You are right, Rog. They did go on for a lot longer than I lasted, but I was in charge of a 7-year-old, so I just want to make clear that was just me. It's not me being a bad fan, it's me being a responsible parent. All the players lined up, and the cop worked through the songs for each of them. So you had Virgil van Dijk and Mohamed Salah and Luis Diaz, and then the sort of more rarely heard Endo song, the Curtis Jones one, which you hear very rarely these days. And then as the players, they went through most of them, Nunez and what have you, they started to kind of get into the reserves. And you sort of thought, hang on, they've missed somebody here. Because obviously, they don't have a Kostas Tsimikas song. But the one first-team player, the one kind of key cog in this title win, who'd not been kind of serenaded, was Szoboszlai. And Szoboszlai's played, most of the games, pretty much every minute. He's been a really important player for Liverpool. But there's no song. There's no song for Dominic Szoboszlai that's caught on at Anfield. So in the end, as the players were walking off, the cop just sort of started shouting, "Dominic Szoboszlai!" And he had to walk over and applaud. But because there was no song, it was just a kind of general bellowing of his name more than anything else. But as awkward as it was, it did kind of show that there was a genuine desire to make sure that everybody felt part of the celebration. And I would say it should teach everybody a lesson, which is please come up with a song for every single one of your players.
God bless. Dom Szoboszlai does look like he'd appreciate just like a little blast of death metal more than any other footballer. I do want to touch upon a couple of facets of this season, this victory. We've got to talk about Arne Slot first. We talked about the humility, the egolessness of the Dutch ball king, fifth manager to win in his first season in the Premier League, adding his name now to the quite epic pantheon of Liverpool legendary winning managers. To me, we talked a lot about this, the single most remarkable act of transformational leadership I've ever seen. You're not meant to be able to replace the man, or in his case, der man, easily. He ended up walking around the field. He's never looked more normcore than with his Liverpool champions jersey pulled on over his button down with his beautiful, beautiful tummy just out there. You've touched upon the singing of Jurgen Slot almost a year to the day on that field. That's his style. This was his moment in the spotlight. And with his very first words to make it about somebody else, his predecessor, is remarkable. I mean, as is the fact that he's working outside the Netherlands for the first time. Their tactical acumen, the calm, the stoicism, the problem-solving collective football, it has been remarkable. And to do it all raw, I wrote about this on Friday, to do it all with the demeanour of, I can only describe Slot as, if he was a protagonist in one of those Netflix detective European noir series who kind of battles in just a grey mac, if he just battles murderous gangs involved in the heroin trade in the lowlands of Europe, like, he does have the demeanour of a man you can imagine stoically solving gory murders, right?
Yeah, just without really betraying any emotion, just working through it. It wouldn't be a thrilling procedural. I think that's fair to say. Like, it wouldn't. He's not like a troubled hero with a heart of gold. He's just like, yes, I will take all of the available evidence and I will solve the crime.
Take all the available evidence.
It has been, and then at the end, I will go home to my wife and to my children.
Exactly that.
I will come to work the next day and do the next thing.
All I want is a cup of coffee. It's very hard-boiled. I mean, it is, above all, to inherit that mantle, though, you're meant to wilt, like Moyes after Sir Alex Ferguson or Avram Grant after Mourinho at Chelsea. How do you understand this? With the 3 contracts, which were like a piece of flapping skin, which I hoped would drag him down.
Well, this is going to sound kind of fascinating, and it's going to make great audio content, Rog. I think a lot of it's to do with organisational process. I think that's what people want to hear.
That's how you solve gory murders.
That's how you solve murders. Process, and it's how you win titles. Process. Liverpool. He wasn't the sexy appointment Slot in the summer. That would have been Xabi Alonso or maybe Ruben Amorim. A lot of people were very sceptical when he joined, basically just because people hadn't really heard of him. He'd won the title, not even the previous season, a couple of years ago with Feyenoord. He was just some Dutch guy. Worse, actually, he was a bald Dutch man at the height of Erik ten Hag's Manchester United. They didn't have a big summer in terms of kind of overhauling the squad. They didn't retool at all, particularly they brought in Chiesa, didn't use him. The reason Slot has succeeded is because Liverpool as a club is very well run. From Fenway Sports Group, the owners, down through Michael Edwards, who's the football executive or something, to Richard Hughes, the sporting director, David Woodfine, the assistant sporting director, down to Slot. There is a clear delineation of responsibility. There is a collective kind of effort and a collective approach. Slot is willing to delegate. He doesn't want to kind of accrue power. Someone said to me last week that this title, more than anything else Liverpool have won under FSG, is the most FSG title, because this is their vision. They have a kind of committee approach to football. They have all these different inputs of data and recruitment and sports science and nutrition, and they have a coach who is one of those cogs. He's not the key person who gets to define everything. It is a process-driven triumph, and Slot fits into that really nicely. And it's not especially sexy, but it's very effective. And it was interesting, actually, the other people he made sure to thank on the pitch at Anfield were the owners and the sporting directors. And it's very rare that any owner gets applauded in soccer. It doesn't really happen. We don't have that American culture of the owner appearing with a big cigar and a big Super Bowl ring.
To take the trophy. That's
not something we do. We don't believe in giving trinkets to our capitalists. But FSG were applauded at Anfield. And that, for an organisation that has not always been popular, that has made several missteps, that has shown a willingness, an admirable willingness to learn when they have been criticised, that is the highest praise. In the same way as a small dance move is the most you will get out of a Yorkshireman in terms of emotion, a gentle ripple of applause is the maximum any owner of any sports team can expect.
Golf clap for FSG. I mean, I do want to say this is a podcast. The theme seems to be great owners. Rob and Ryan at Wrexham, FSG at Liverpool, obviously the Freakins at Everton Football Club, dynastic. But it is amazing, the FSG story. American owners took over the club at their lowest ebb, on the cusp of bankruptcy from other American owners, quickly taught themselves. I think their learning curve in that anarchical world of English football, which makes it so different to American sports. They're not oligarchs, they're not nation states, but they're really the only club who found a pathway to competing against both of the above. delivered 2 titles now, Champions League 2, restored the lustre of the club. You've named many of the challenges they met, and thought their way through the Klopp succession, sporting director succession with Richard Hughes winning his first title at the club. They've navigated the don't blink first negotiations with Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk. A film with Red Sox manager Alex Curran, a massive red, obviously leads the other arm of FSG's empire. And I'm just like, we talked about, what is it with football fans that they've only gone and delivered 2 titles after 0 in 30 years without blowing up the transfer market. They built a stadium. Yes, they do think about revenues. You kind of do have to think about revenues to compete in the 21st century. It's like, unfortunately, a critical part of football. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I hear on occasion, I remember in the wobble after the Klopp first title, the tweet, FSG, get out of me club, you're ruining me club. I've said it before, I do wish they'd ruin my club in a similar way, Ro.
It's one of those things where football, I think generally, by that I mean fans, journalists, players, ex-players, managers, coaches, pundits, whatever, we find it quite difficult to realise that things can be related but not intertwined. So Liverpool have been, as you said earlier, thoroughly deserving champions. But this has also been kind of a disappointing Premier League season. It's fine to say that. It doesn't reflect badly on Liverpool. They have been, by some distance, the best team in the league. They've won the title in April. They've really deserved it. It's hard to say they haven't deserved it. But the season itself has been a little bit of a, relegation sorted. Man United and Tottenham have been terrible. Those things don't have to kind of relate to each other. They can both coexist at the same time. And in the same way, FSG are not perfect owners. The involvement with the Super League, some of the ticket price stuff they've tried to do, some of their decision making has been flawed. But while they're not perfect, they have run the club very well. What they have done with Liverpool is a model of what maybe modern ownership of a football team should look like. They are smart and they are innovative. They're willing to delegate at certain times and in certain ways to people who know better. It's really hard to argue with what they've built over the last 15 years, given that Liverpool have now won the Premier League twice, the Champions League once, and they've been to another 2 finals. For a club of Liverpool's size, they're not Real Madrid, they're not Manchester United, they don't have the resources of Manchester City or Chelsea. That is genuinely remarkable.
The change is coming. By the way, the last one on Arne Slot, I loved that he came on our show last week and I asked him how winning the title has changed him, and his answer was really beautiful. He said, a year ago, I was the father of Issa and Jop and the husband of wife Miriam. A year later, I'm still that person. Of course, people judge me more on my performance at Liverpool, but in life, there are more important things than that. I just say amen to that. It's a beautiful interview. And for Liverpool, tomorrow is another day. Changes are coming. Lots of articles already this morning in the England press about where Liverpool need to strengthen. Slot actually hinted at that when I spoke to him. He talked about how he was the big change last summer, that there will be much more to come. Rebuild on both flanks. Midfield needs reinforcement. Front 3 need to be reconfigured. Probably Project Nunez is now over. By the way, did love watching players like Andy Robertson take photos. You really felt a profundity of the moment there. But Raw, so many firsts for you to celebrate. First Dutch manager to win the Premier League. Virgil, first Dutch captain to win the Premier League. Tsimikas, first Greek. Szoboszlai, first Hungarian to win the Premier League. Trent Alexander-Arnold, first Real Madrid player to win the Premier League. But above all, as a last word, I felt like there was a sense of history in this moment. That was part of the joy of matching up to Manchester United, who had knocked Liverpool off their perch and run away with the league title lead. Liverpool, I grew up with, you hinted at it earlier, they felt like they were constantly parading a massive trophy at the bottom. They'd go down my road on Menlove Avenue in Liverpool. They would go down on a bus. I'd go down guiltily to watch them, mostly because they threw chewing gum off the top of the bus, and I always wanted some. That was the most guilty gum I ever chewed as a kid later that night, Liverpool gum. This was about identity too, Raw. Restoring 20 title wins, themselves as frontrunners, recovering a sense of self. That was kind of what we witnessed at Anfield yesterday. Yeah,
I think that's right. I think that aspect of it hadn't really been talked about in the build-up, because it was much more about the first title with fans in attendance, the chance to celebrate, to commune with kind of Anfield as a whole. But matching Manchester United's tally of 20 matters. That was Liverpool's identity for a long time, England's most successful club. And, on Friday, last Friday, you could make a case that Liverpool would have been England's most successful club, whether they won the title this season or not, because of European Cups, depends how you count it. But now that you've taken away United's advantage in domestic titles, I think it is inarguable that Liverpool are England's most successful club. That is how Liverpool sees itself. It has a complex identity in terms of whether it's a member of the elite or an underdog or maybe both. But the one thing that has always been kind of Liverpool's thing, Shankly called it the bread and butter, is winning the league title. It was interesting that so many of the chants that came out of the Kop yesterday were old ones, songs that refer to it as the Football League, songs that include the phrase "ei adio," which is not something young people say, Roger. I don't want to disabuse you of any notions, but you don't hear Gen Z saying "ei adio."
Didn't make it to Snapchat, did it?
No, it didn't make it to Snapchat. There is a real sense of tradition. There were banners that had clearly been repurposed. I don't know whether they were new versions of old banners or the old banners themselves that had been brought out to celebrate that connection to Liverpool's history, to the idea that this is a club doing what it should be doing.
God, it is amazing. The sense of theatre in football, it is remarkable. That is, you could write a whole essay on the Slot won his first game. We watched to see at Anfield against Ipswich that first day back in August. We watched to see how he'd behave. And I spoke to him about it. He just ran off the field, didn't engage with the Kop at all, because anything would have just made him look like a Klopp tribute band. To see him do the 3 Klopp fist bumps on this, all of it is so theatrical. It's almost biblical when you analyse the intelligence, the emotional beauty. And now we have to live out the rest of the season with guard of honour after guard of honour, possibly the most old school, gentlemanly tradition in a now very commercial, crass, brash Premier League reality. Very funny to me that this hint of the Victorian still survives, Rory.
But it should. It's awkward for the teams that have to do it, but it should exist, because that is it is ultimately sport, and that is the atmosphere in which sport should be conducted. And I think it would be a real shame to get rid of that just because we think it's kind of not sufficiently gladiatorial.
So amazing. It's so old school. They should have to take off their capes or like wear boaters and doff them, twirl a handlebar.
It would be good if they had to doff a hat. Yes, that would be an addition. Maybe we should suggest it.
Huzzah, sir!
But it's also quite funny that the first two... I mean, Brighton and Palace will have to do it, and that's not particularly big deal. Hopefully it'll be a preview of next season's Community Shield when Palace come to Anfield on the final day of the season. But the fact that Chelsea and Arsenal have to do it is moderately enjoyable.
We have covered a lot there. It is worth unpacking. We have to touch, though, upon the FA Cup semi-finals, which are honestly oddly muted. Let's talk quickly with yesterday's game. Nottingham Forest 0, Manchester City 2. Forest never settled. Got to credit City. Tactical guile from Pep. Forest impregnable centre-backs were seen to be totally confused because Pep went no-fix centre-forward, had a squadron of fast attackers, Lewis, Grealish, Marmoush, Savinho. It was like watching, honestly, them taking turns from no-fix point, like watching Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, Mingus, Thelonious Monk. It paid off within 2 minutes via Rico Lewis, and Forest toiled, kept hitting the back. They hit the post 3 times. But the game was over when Vardy all thumped home a header on 51 minutes. Raw and agony for Nottingham Forest. I hope they get their ultimate reward. Suddenly in 6, albeit with a game in hand. Godspeed to them and their fans who really made a moment at Wembley. Pep insisted that winning the FA Cup will not make this a season of wonder. I do wonder what the FA Cup will be used for. If they probably the doorstop at the Manchester City Academy, they'll pop it under some wobbly table in the club cafe. Is an FA Cup for Pep an FA Cup only akin to like being an A-lister celebrity who's fallen so much that you end up in like one of those celebrity rehab shows?
I think they'll probably put keys in it, won't they? It'll be sort of sit in the dressing room. They'll just be like, just lob your keys in there, change, business
lost
cards.
Property.
It's the lost property FA Cup. Yes and no. He's right to say that it doesn't make up for everything else that's happened this season. It will be very much a kind of consolation prize, and it would be a shame after what's been a brilliant FA Cup season if it is reduced to that status. Which is why I would like Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup.
I think everyone does who's not a Man City fan.
Yeah, I think that they will be.
Or
I
Brighton.
heard them described on the radio last night as probably the most overwhelming neutral favourites we've ever had in an FA Cup final.
It's just Brighton and City fans who'll be roaring.
And even Brighton fans don't really care, Rog. They're not that bothered. I think the one kind of offset to that is that people who win as much as Pep are addicted to winning, and he won't see it as a kind of consolation prize. He will be desperate to win that trophy just to add to his haul.
Saturday, game you were at, Crystal Palace 3, Aston Villa 0. Really an old school FA Cup semi-final of wonder. Both sets of fans delirious. Oliver Glasner's had Unai Emery's number all season. Undefeated in the 3 games this season, won in the League Cup 2. And the game began in the fog of war. Flare smoke, balloons everywhere, an Eze banger. This was bangers only for Crystal Palace. What a performance. I'm so happy for them, so happy for Chris Richards. They've been to 2 finals in the modern period, lost them both to Manchester United. I do think, Raw, ultimately, Oliver Glasner is the difference maker as they charge into the search for the first domestic trophy in their entire history, which is remarkable. They were founded in 1861. Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated as president. I hate the theatre too, Abe, but that's how long they've been in existence without winning something. The key has got to be here. Oliver Glasner, the manager, he's won things. He's guided Eintracht Frankfurt to victory in the Europa League. He led them to a Pokal final 12 months later. He can, with that brain. Chris Richards talking about how he's created a blind faith confidence for this team. It is very much a Glasner as a difference maker for Crystal Palace fans.
And also they're England's sunshine team, aren't they, Crystal Palace? They're brilliant for the first few months of the season, generally, or the last few months of the season. They like it when it's sunny. The weather's turned, suddenly Palace are amazing again. They were incredible on Saturday. They will threaten Manchester City. They're a team that have got a decent record against City, actually. They've always been a bit of not quite a bogey team, but they've posed City problems. And in Eze, in Mateta, in Adam Wharton, who was superb on Saturday.
Superb.
They've got players who can make the difference, who can ask questions of City. But the big thing, and there was a little bit of a controversy here over the weekend that City, I think, hadn't sold out their allocation for Wembley, which is understandable. They've been to Wembley 17 times in 10 years or something. It costs a fortune, the tickets, the travel. It's totally understandable. Palace's end on Saturday was absolute mayhem. It was like watching Bayern Munich or PSG's fans. That sort of constant noise, the orchestration, the choreography, the flares, the chanting, the bouncing, all of it. Palace's fans, led by their ultra faction, the Holmesdale Fanatics, they will give that cup final a real sense of spectacle and occasion. The fans in particular deserve to be there.
God bless. And of course, big shout out to Salah. As that old Buddhist saying goes, one week you're having your shorts pulled down by Patrick Kluivert with the world watching. The next, you're stepping up and composing yourself to lash low. Oh, past the stunned Emi Martinez to more. Let's go back to the league. Newcastle 3, Ipswich 0. Eddie Howe, great to see him back, talking beautifully about how he tried to brush off his illness. He said, like most men, you sort of go through everything. You don't offer yourself to doctors. You think I'll be okay in a couple of days. I'll fight through it. He says he's still not 100%, but it was delirious to see him back on the sideline. And joy for Toon against really, in this one, a wilting, impotent, screaming at relegation's abyss, Ipswich Town. They had to win. They didn't win. They were absolutely smothered. I think Toon had nearly 80% possession. And God bless, Newcastle now must lumber up to battles against Brighton, Chelsea and Arsenal in that fight for a top 5 place. Let's just bury Ipswich, one of the cuddliest relegation fights in Premier League history. They arrived for the first time in 22 years in the Premier League. There was boldness, there was audacity, there was a lot of defensive frailty that they could never, ever sort out. Nice wins, nice memories. Spurs and Chelsea, their fans, I've seen them. I saw them at Bournemouth, dizzying throughout. In fact, credit the Newcastle fans for giving them a standing ovation as they left the stadium. But in the end, just 4 wins, 27 points dropped from winning positions. That will do you in. Raw, we've talked previously about how this come up, get relegated, try and reinvest, come up harder, seems to be a methodology teams are moving towards. But for the first time in Premier League history, all 3 relegation places locked up with 4 games to go. Second straight season, we had 3 up, 3 down. Is there anything the Premier League can do to prevent this new middle-class might problem?
There are things the Premier League can do. There are not things the Premier League will do, because ultimately the current arrangement works for everybody else in the Premier League. I think the teams at the top, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, they don't really care what happens in terms of parachute payments, in terms of the relationship between the Premier League and the Championship. For everyone kind of at West Ham and above, teams like West Ham, Wolves, Crystal Palace, effectively what's happened is the drawbridge has come up behind them. They have been promoted. They've been able to ensconce themselves in the Premier League. It works for them if Leeds and Burnley and whoever else comes up through the playoffs this season go straight back down. To be honest, they'd probably be quite happy to see them replaced by Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton. Then they can go down and then Leeds can come up again. The people who've got the power to change it benefit from the current arrangement, so there's no reason to change it.
Burnley and Leeds, new friends, caveat emptor. Bournemouth won, Manchester United won, Bournemouth again. Oh, absolutely fizzing. The opening goal, it looked as if United had not watched a single moment of Bournemouth game film as the Cherries pressed the life out of them. Semenyo with the opener. A red card to Evan Nielsen changed the game. 10 blocks for a quite valiant Golden War Cherries who wilted finally in the 96th minute. Cross from Luke Shaw, prodded forward by Ugarte in the box. His shot went in off a Højlund flick. As one United fan texted me, Højlund, unstoppable when he scores accidentally. United nick a point, avoid a 16th defeat of the Premier League season. Not a lot changes for them. Bournemouth, though, really in agony for beautiful, beautiful Bournemouth. They must now face Arsenal, Villa and Manchester City. Their hopes for Europe hanging on by an ember. I spoke to owner Bill Foley this morning. Talked with very real passion about the new training ground, the new stadium, and also how Tyler Adams reminds him of, quote, Bill Foley on the field. But progress is going to have to be measured over seasons instead of the joyful outcome that we had hoped at the midway point. Wolves 3. Leicester City 0. Fox's first farewell to Jamie Vardy game. It did not go as planned. Jose Sa evidently does not care about your sentimentality. Days after Vardy announced his departure from Leicester, he had a penalty saved. There's no one crueler than the sporting gods. Game was forgettable. Let's talk about Vardy, though. We called it last week that he was, quote, considering a conscious uncoupling. I think the hostage video vibes of his farewell statement only somehow made it feel all the more perfect. 143 Premier League goals over 13 years, including one magical title, Infinite Dark Arts. Taujari Sellies came on our show this season. I asked him how he'd like to be remembered. He said, as a man who caused carnage. I said, you don't want to be remembered for the goals. And he just goes, the goals were involved in the carnage, weren't they? Which is the summation of his heel persona. Raw. He's probably the closest we've come to an NHL hockey pest. But there is something that is kind of like abrasive skin hides an incredible human story. He was 27 years, 232 days old when he made his Premier League debut, August 2014. We have watched this Vardy, and most of his goals have come after the age of 30. That, to me, is his true peculiar brilliance.
Yeah, the fact that he's kind of connected to the soul of the game. He came up through Stocksbridge Park Steels, just outside Sheffield, played for Fleetwood, for Halifax, ended up at Leicester in the Championship, and then came up. They tried to replace him. I think the club assumed he wouldn't be good enough for the Premier League. And then he built this career where he was a kind of late bloomer. It's easy not to fall in love with the character Jamie Vardy.
He makes it very easy not to fall in love with him. That's his genius.
He kind of revels in that heel persona. It's a great way of summing him up.
I am amazing. Do not love me.
He is a heel, but he has unquestionably enriched and enlivened the world of football. He has been a notable character who people will remember, and his actual achievements have been truly astonishing.
I love this storyline, though, as the newspapers scream, Ryan Reynolds, Wrexham favourites to sign Jamie Vardy. The notion of Jamie Vardy playing against Leicester next season is just so chef's kiss. God, his celebration against Leicester, if he scores, how will he do a fox celly against them? It'll just be genuinely bloody believable. Southampton 1. Fulham 2. Southampton's valiant fight to avoid equalling the worst points total in Premier League history at lollops on. They had the point they needed, and then they didn't. Ryan Sessegnon again girding his loins to break Saints' hearts in the 92nd minute, which moved Fulham to 8th. Top 8 could be enough for Europe unless Crystal Palace win the FA Cup. And talking about late winners, Brighton 3, West Ham 2. Graham Potter returns to the Amex, slightly dishevelled in state. West Ham's own fans singing the phrase their striker Nicholas Fulkrug used post-match last week when he called the Hammers football, quote, shite. They chanted it throughout the first half. The game was an agony. Hammers thought they'd had their first comeback win of the season. They led 2-1 into the 89th minute. Graham Potter redemption arc begins. But then Matoma headed home 89th minute. And Baliba's viciously wicked arcing winner in the 92nd meant only Southampton, Leicester and Ipswich have fewer points than Potter's West Ham in his 14 games. He said post-game, I'm not a robot. Of course I'm going to be upset. If you want me to swear, I can swear. Narrator, he did not swear. Raw, how do you understand Graham Potter? Is it had it, lost it, or is it Chelsea destroys everything it touches? Or is it his time at Brighton was really 98% Brighton and we're all deceived by his semi-posh, boyish decency and good looks?
I don't think it's that. I think he is a good coach. I wonder whether Chelsea has taken some of his, not just self-confidence, but maybe a little bit of that kind of authority that you need in the game to win the respect of the players. But mainly I'd probably attribute it to kind of innate West Hamness. West Ham are possibly the worst run club in the Premier League.
God, that is it. He had Brightonness at Brighton. He had Chelsea-ness at Chelsea. And he keeps putting himself at places that overwhelm any control whatsoever.
But maybe this is true of all managers, Rog. Maybe that's why Arne Slot at Liverpool, this essentially unremarkable Dutch manager, the guy solving crimes by going...
in his grubby raincoat.
Through the evidence and then leaving, and if there is an issue, I will not start in the middle of the night. I will just wait until the morning and solve it with suitable reinforcements. Maybe he is just a kind of reflection of the character of Liverpool, the club. Potter is just... Managers are just mirrors. They reflect the clubs themselves back to us. And so Graham Potter, at the moment, looks like he is a man who's very much in charge of West Ham.
And that's why David Moyes is the innate nature of Everton-ness. And by the way, when you do your Arne Slot Netflix detective voice, it does remind me of the great Netflix show with Ferry Booman, which I recommend to everybody. Chelsea won, Everton nil. Oh, surprise, surprise. This actually must win for Maresca's Chelsea, trying to leapfrog Newcastle, Nottingham, Forest. I didn't fear for them in this game. Everton had not won at Chelsea since 1994. The US has had 2 men's World Cups nearly in that time. David Moyes had not won there in a Sisyphusian 24 attempts. On another show, we'll talk about how that kind of mental block happens no matter who the players are, who the manager is, just to happen over and over again. We just go to the bridge, meekly accepting our fate, Raw, and that fate is often human darkness. Doing it shields down, no Tarkowski. Everton without Tark is a bit like, and a crap you're not, like 1986 Argentina without Diego Maradona. A game of snooze in the sun. Chelsea ran into space, Everton ceded, Tarkless. We didn't muster a shot. And then Beto coughed up the ball in the middle of the park. Oh, gent is a shadow of the king that did Liverpool and netted 5 goals in 5 games. Enzo fed it to Nico Jackson, who hadn't scored in 4.5 months, and he span and lashed past little Pickford, Dr. Everton. First goal for him since December the 15th. You're welcome. The game was really full of drift. Poor Cole Palmer, the talking point, really. I think Maresca said afterwards, it's not the tactical, it's not the technical, the style of football's the same, the club is the same, kind of hinting that it's all utterly mental. Talking about mental, Everton made a late fist of it. Robert Sanchez actually did well. Of course, he turns into a vague sense of professional goalkeeper when he plays Everton. Chelsea's home form carries them 6 wins in 6. We'll say quickly, Raw, this is a sick thing to say. We are mid-table now. I kind of miss the things we used to have. The danger of the relegation zone. Now we're playing these games that mean nothing. I listened to, there was a singer, Samia, on NPR this weekend. She's released an album all about absence. And she said, I'm really fascinated with just how powerful absence can be. Whatever isn't there holds more promise and possibility than what's there. I realised I missed the sick thrill, Raw. Just that abyss screaming of a relegation battle.
I might see if we can clip that up and play it every 9 months or so, just when Everton are starting to look slightly sort of worrying again, and you can remember that you once expressed that sentiment in public.
Yes, that's fair. That was very stupid. But I feel so hopeful, Raw. And that's the true absence for Everton, the hope. That's what we have now with the Friedkins. Yes, with the loss of home of Goodison, but renewed possibility that is to come. I loved hearing David Moyes talk about the Friedkin group. He called them Everton's new lover. That concept of an owner-lover is a bit weird, I'm going to be candid.
Deeply weird.
Yes, I know we don't have time to get into it. Thank God for the new stadium. Please God, the amount of funds over the summer. That is the hope. I'm actually headed back to Goodison next weekend to commune once more with my family and that magical place. But let's finish, Raw, with a really lovely, quite fitting letter from a GFOP, a raven that came to us at meninblazers@gmail.com from a really wonderful writer, Molly Polig. Send us your postal, Molly. We'll send you a patch. Raw, do the honours.
Dear Roger and Rory, I've been a Liverpool fan since Patrick Berger wore that little Alice band. No need to spread the word of Patrick Berger to me. Around the time my brother decided he was an Arsenal supporter. Our family has divided along these lines, with a niece and several nephews siding with my brother, my mother and another niece coming with me. My mom turns 86 this year, and it was decided we would go to Anfield. I was chosen as her lucky companion, and my husband and toddler son came along for the trip, generously assisted with funding by my sister, an AC Milan fan who has never forgiven us for Istanbul. We arrived just in time for the Everton game in April. We went out for a lovely full English that morning, and then disaster struck. My mum tripped on the sidewalk, hitting her face pretty hard, and breaking a tooth that went through her lip. That sounds horrible, just to be clear.
Awful.
Apologise for that.
Awful.
That's when we began to meet an array of brilliant, kind and generous Liverpudlians. From the guy outside the pub who called the ambulance, to the women who went into the pub for a first aid kit, to Kate, lovely, amazing Kate, who I wish I could send flowers to, you'll need a more accurate address than that, who told us that English ambulances take forever and she would drive us to a walk-in centre. And when the walk-in centre wasn't taking walk-ins, which is true of a lot of...
Why would it?
The front door of our NHS at the moment, drove us across town to the Royal Liverpool University Hospital.
Amazing.
Then there were the nurses and doctors who understood the importance of getting us out by game time, even the Everton supporters. I've tried that before. They don't always respond well to telling them, I have an artificial deadline. Please help within that.
Well, I'm surprised the Everton nurses were like, here's a red flare to take to the game.
Alas, she didn't end up feeling well enough to go, and I went solo, a highly bittersweet experience with that empty seat beside me. It was a bit surreal and dreamlike. I had high hopes that the next day the four of us would make it for our Anfield tour, but she decided it would be best to stay in. My husband went alone and very sweetly bought about half the store for her. The next day we were off to London. That's a poor choice. But before our train, Mum and I decided to just go and get a glimpse. When the Anfield staff heard our sad story, they promptly gave us a tour with a guide, the lovely Terry, who regaled us with stories as we walked through the dressing rooms, press room, museum, and of course the field. So was it the dream trip we'd been hoping to give her? No, but it was the best possible scenario after the worst one. Even if she didn't get to see Salah, she got to sit on his bench and touch the sign and come into contact with some amazing people. Shout out to the NHS. She got to spend some extra time with her youngest grandchild, who spent the entire trip insisting on holding her hand. And she is now pleased to get to tell people that she has bled red on the streets of Liverpool. You'll never walk alone. Molly.
Oh, Raw. I mean, that is a beautiful... That story contains multitude. I don't know how you react to that as a Liverpool fan, but there's a beauty of dreams and then adapting to the realities there, which ultimately is what life's about.
Well, also, it feeds into one of my main, slightly prejudiced views, Rog, which is that people in the north of England are friendly and will help you when they need it. If that had happened in London, she'd have been left. No one would have helped. And she'd be like, well, I don't care. But in Liverpool, as in Leeds...
Don't take it away from her. I think Win the dog would have run on and just licked her face back to consciousness.
No, I mean, in all seriousness, people will help. And I think that football is one of those things that brings people together. It kind of... There would have been people in that hospital who understood the importance of getting to the football match that you'd cross an ocean for, because people know what football means. And I think it showcases the goodness within humanity, which is a universal trait, showcases that it's quite good that you wouldn't have had to pay for any of it. And it also showcases how instinctive it is that people understand what football means. And I think that is a genuinely lovely story.
I listened to that letter and it takes me back to this time last season. I was meant to go and watch Everton play Crystal Palace with J-Dubs, and I came home and found my mum in the house with pneumonia. Had to take her to the hospital out of nowhere. The Royal Liverpool too, actually. It's an incredible institution. Ended up watching the game from there with the doctors and the nurses. So I do empathise. That I know that feeling, the agony as the hours tick away towards your best plans, and then you realise you're not going to make it. By the way, that pang of selfish sadness that I felt when I realised I wasn't going to get to the game after 12 hours in the hospital, and then the immediate overwhelming sense of gratitude that my mum was okay. Like, I hope your mum is, and in great hands. And a reminder that some things are more important than football, which, by the way, admittedly was a very fleeting sense for me. But to you, Molly, and your mum, I hope you made incredible memories together yesterday. Savour every second watching your club, which is what I'm going to do next week at Goodison Park. Let me know if you're going at meninblazers@gmail.com, and we can commune. This week, we're filming with Mikel Arteta, releasing our Brené Brown interview towards the end of the week. It really is top 10 all-time conversation. Enormous Liverpool fan. Liverpool fans, keep writing to us. Send us your messages, your photos, your dogs and cats, your football connections. meninblazers@gmail.com. Gives us joy and energy when we need it. We are 409 days from World Cup 2026. Let's savour each and every one. Raw, again, huge love to you, you Crown Prince of Harrogate, and big congratulations.
I'll close with the 4 words that will echo around my head for the rest of the week. And those words, Roger, are hand it over, Manchester.
I thought they were going to be real men don't cry. This is Rog sending you big love. Let's not take a second watching football together for granted. and courage.